I was in a human behavior class, and a man said that he believed that women in Nepal all got their periods sooner because they were forced to marry at a young age and have children. And he had been to visit there, and that's why he knew that this was true about Nepalese women. I think she could have pointed out that there's a reason why an American man would feel comfortable making such a blanket statement about women of color in an othered culture instead of just saying, well, I don't know if that's true, and moving on. She kind of glossed over it, and I think it was a moment where we could have talked about why it was that he felt comfortable saying this in the first place.
So what happened in class is that the professor was actually talking about an illness called ataque de nervios, and the illness is usually associated with Hispanics. There was one particular student who, in talking about that, pointed to another student and assumed that she was from Hispanic background, and the teacher did not address it. At least to acknowledge that he was inappropriate in what he said, because she didn't even acknowledge it. I wanted to say that the professor should have addressed cultural competence, that it was a good opportunity for the rest of the class to learn from that particular situation, and she did not address it at all.
One time in first year policy, we talked about Reaganomics and the development of the welfare queen title, and the specific professor stated something to the effect of, these black people have to understand, XYZ about this policy. And everybody in the class had a great big WTF face. And when I looked at her and she looked at me, it wasn't a pleasant look. And then she was like, well, I'm just saying. And I think that sparked a discussion in the class that she wasn't able to monitor because she wasn't able to monitor herself. And so I think that this is a rampant thing around Hunter, even if it's implicit amongst faculty. I think it needs to be changed. In the classroom would have been a hard opportunity for her to do that if she is not being competent and accountable for what she's saying, which I think students look at professors to be that. When they're not that, no one knows what else to do. Which is unfortunate, because then the students of color who are in the room who know it's wrong are caught in this kind of dichotomous situation. Do I express the learned voicelessness that I've been dealing with all my life, or do I act out and risk that the professor looks at me in a bad light and grades my papers as such? So I'm not really sure what the teacher could have done except read more, learn more, do some more anti-oppressive work.
There's been several situations where I feel that a conversation about race could have happened. For example, in one of my classes, a student came in with their daughter, and as a child would, the child was playing around and being, loud, and the student decided to tell the child not to do that and to reprimand them. And this student was black, and another student who was white butted in and said, I think you should take your daughter outside and take care of her. And everyone was kind of shocked and silent that this had happened, and it seemed to me that this was a race dynamic that was going on. I think the situation could have definitely been something that was discussed in class. I think my teacher could have been an ally. The teacher was in the room, and I think that having the situation discussed, because afterward it was as if nothing had happened and we just moved forward with the topic of the day. And the professor definitely could have talked about power and privilege and about race and how the dynamics played out in the classroom. It was definitely a teaching moment, and it wasn't utilized.
In practice lab, we received a letter, the entire school received a letter in regards to being escorted from the school to the train station for those students who felt unsafe in the neighborhood, which obviously there needed to be discussion around that. And when it was brought up in the classroom, not only was it facilitated really poorly, but there was no room for growth, because it was just this attack of I feel this way and no, you feel that way. And then it was just like, it wasn't facilitated well at all. That professor in particular had a lot of issues going on. So I think that he brought a lot of his stuff into the classroom, which created a lot of tension for him, so he couldn't facilitate well. And what I really needed him to do was to deal with his stuff on his own so that he could be a better facilitator in the classroom and protect those students who really felt like their voice wasn't acknowledged and that what they were saying was legitimate, and not necessarily doing absolutely nothing but being uncomfortable in the classroom. And it was clear that he was uncomfortable, and that's why it wasn't facilitated well, because we had to become the advocates for ourselves and not feeling protected by the educator in the classroom who was supposed to guide the conversation in a safe way for both parties. So it was just really, it was one of those experiences that made me write a very long paper afterwards. So
they're talking about the Israel trip. She finished her little spiel. Everyone discussed their last experience, asked their questions. In the whole hour, Palestine was not addressed at all. They were talking about anti-oppression, or the curriculum in Palestine wasn't discussed at all. So I raised my hand and I asked how they address Palestinians into the curriculum. And she laughed and she said that will take 6 months to answer. Next question. So for her, I'm sure in her response, she did not assume that I was Palestinian. Or if she did, that's like racism on a whole nother level. But initially, her response was because she didn't assume that anyone else wasn't in the room. So for me, that basically told me that my experience, or a Palestinian experience, is irrelevant. I think a lot of times professors or anyone who gets addressed with a question that makes them uncomfortable wasn't in their focus as a person in a privileged position. You dismissing an experience is part of that privilege.
I can remember a really poignant moment, which other people remember because I kind of ended up crying. But we had a situation where the security sent out this email saying that, if you're afraid to be in East Harlem and you don't want to walk down the street by yourself, we'll give you an escort, right? Which is so insulting because it's like, you moved into this neighborhood, now you're afraid to walk around, right? And so we're having this conversation where the people of color are saying, this is race related, this is racism. And then it started off as all the white people were saying, this isn't, it's just about safety. And so we're going back and forth, and the teacher is allowing this to happen. And is we all have points of view, as though my pain and their academic belief about what's happening are the same thing, which they're obviously not. I would have appreciated if my professor could have been more willing to talk about how that it's kind of a meta conversation, that both the classroom was having a racial incident and that, I as a person of color was re-experiencing a traumatic incident of race, and also that we could have said, actually, this is related to race, and let's talk about how our responses to it are going to affect our clients or how they're going to affect the way we interact with each other. But race was in the room, and pretending as though it wasn't or not dealing with it in an effective way was really harmful to the people of color who were in the room.
We had a conversation about our conditions of learning for a class, and one person, we'd had an initial conversation, and someone had made the comment that we should assume best intentions when people are speaking, and we revisited the conditions of learning the following week, and one person brought up that they didn't feel that we should assume best intentions, and then that the person who made that comment took it back. It was racial because the person who made the comment about us not assuming good intentions was a person of color. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it wasn't safe to say, because it felt then like you were attacking that person of color, right? And then you were siding with the enemy, who wasn't the person who took the comment back was not a person of color. So that's what created the tension. Well, I feel like the thing that the professor did that was helpful was that he kept putting it back out to the group, like, how do people feel about this? And he was eliciting responses from the group. So in other words, he didn't just let it kind of, it's like, okay, let's go on to the next thing, let's go into the next condition of learning. And he created the opportunity, even though no one took the opportunity, it was still there available for us, should anyone want to step into that or step up.
So this happened about 10 minutes ago during our professional seminar class. It was the last presentation. One of my classmates was discussing a topic related to ADHD and made a reference to sort of the different literature as a Chinese menu. He used that analogy. The class started laughing. It was a very high energy presentation. I saw that people in the room were actually not really laughing and were actually getting kind of uncomfortable, and that the laughter was really an indication of discomfort. So initially I was laughing with the group, and then I saw, wait a minute, I don't think this is actually okay. I pretty much saw the teacher have, I like to say their process. It was very visible, and it seemed sort of similar to what I was going through. It was a combination of laughter, being like, this is not okay. We do see this teacher as a leader in our school, and I think that there was sort of an expectation. What was sort of surprising which was I think a really great moment to see and a learning experience for me, was after the class, the student that presented sort of asked a little bit more about sort of what they said that was offensive about it. And the teacher, we all were like on our way out, New Yorkers were kind of like going one minute and the other, but we took a pause and, we saw this as an opportunity to really, I guess, process what happened. I need to know what I don't know, and at least see from this teacher maybe how she could handle it. And that was a big moment for me to even just take a pause and pay attention. And I saw that she was able to kind of extract in a language what that meant. Not that this person has to understand what microaggressions are, and using really these buzzwords, which probably I actually was about to use with him, but really just explaining how you might not understand it, but I have faith that you are going to not repeat this again. And part of me, I guess, wanted, and I was so admiring my classmate for even asking the question. I saw where he was in the process, and I only hope that more people can do that. And it was just like a really precious moment for me to see that.